You're listening to The Observing Eye. Pirate radio for the mind. Coming at you fresh from the computer hell cabin.
Hello, you beautiful lot. It is Sunday, the 12th of January, 2025, and you're listening to episode 97 of The Observing Eye, coming at you live from the computer hell cabin. Every week we get psychological, philosophical, and all manner of introspective. I'm David, and this week we'll be unpacking the Exegesis of Philip K. Dick, a sprawling, unfinished, and deeply personal exploration of some of the most challenging questions humanity has ever faced. But before we get into that, I just wanted to wish you all a happy new year and thanks for joining us again in 2025. This is our first episode of the year. I've taken a bit of a break over Christmas for a few weeks just to decompress, and it has been wonderful. I hope you've all had a good amount of time to just rest and recuperate and reflect upon your experience as a human being as well. So let's get into it then. The Exegesis of Philip K. Dick. What is real? There's a question, isn't it? What is the nature of time? Is there a divine force at work in the universe, and if so, what does it want from us? These are just a few of the topics that Dick wrestled with in his monumental collection of notes, essays, and philosophical musings. But the Exegesis isn't just this big book. It's a tome, if you haven't seen it. It's huge. It is a glimpse into the mind of one of the most fascinating and tormented thinkers of the 20th century, and coincidentally, one of my favourite science fiction authors. Philip K. Dick is best known as a science fiction writer, the man behind stories that inspired films like Blade Runner, Minority Report, and the series The Man in the High Castle. But while his novels often grappled with dystopian futures, alternate realities, and the fragility of human identity, the Exegesis takes us far beyond the boundaries of fiction. This is not a narrative. It is a philosophical journal, a diary of metaphysical exploration, and at times a desperate cry for understanding. To truly appreciate the Exegesis, we need to understand the man behind it. Now, Philip K. Dick was no ordinary writer. He was a man haunted by questions of reality and divinity, a man whose life was marked by profound experiences that blurred the line between madness and revelation. Most notably, in 1974, Dick had a series of mystical visions, events that would shape the rest of his life and much of his later work. He believed he had encountered something divine, something he often referred to as VALIS, or the Vast Active Living Intelligence System. Whether these experiences were spiritual awakenings, symptoms of mental illness, or some combination of the two, they became the foundation for the Exegesis. In the Exegesis, we see Dick wrestling with the implications of those experiences, trying to make sense of a world that seemed to him increasingly fractured and unreal. He draws on an eclectic mix of influences: Gnosticism, Christian theology, Eastern philosophy, and cutting-edge science. Well, at the time, this was back in the 70s. He questions everything: the trustworthiness of his own perceptions, the reliability of memory, and even the very fabric of time itself. What emerges is a document that is as fragmented and chaotic as it is brilliant, a work that reflects the complexity of Dick's mind and the enormity of the questions he was grappling with. But why should we in 2025 care about the ramblings of a science fiction writer who died over 4 decades ago and did take quite a lot of drugs? Because the questions that Dick explored in the Exegesis are more relevant now than they ever have been. In our age of AI and virtual reality and deepfake technology and all the rest, the boundaries between real and unreal are increasingly blurred. As we enter a world of shifting timelines, fractured truths, and simulated realities, Dick's work offers us a philosophical toolkit for making sense of it all, or at least for embracing the mystery. In this episode, we're going to explore the Exegesis from several angles. We'll start with Philip K. Dick's life and the experiences that shaped his thinking. Then we'll dive into the central themes of the book, its meditations on reality, divinity, and human identity. We'll take a look at how some of those themes have influenced his writing and the parallels that you'll see in his stories. And then we'll consider what insights that the Exegesis offers for us today. This won't just be a journey into the mind of Philip K. Dick, it's going into the heart of existence itself. Let's explore the exegesis and see what it has to teach us about reality, the divine, and the eternal search for meaning. Now that we've set the stage, let's dive deeper into the life of Philip K. Dick, the man behind the exegesis. To understand this tome of philosophical outpourings, we need to explore Dick's life, his struggles, his triumphs, and the extraordinary experiences that led him to question the very nature of reality. Philip Kindred Dick was born on December 16, 1928 in Chicago, Illinois. From the beginning, his life was marked by tragedy. He was a twin, but his sister, Jane, died just 6 weeks after their birth due to malnutrition and poor care. This loss haunted Dick throughout his life. He often spoke of feeling incomplete, as if part of his soul had been taken from him. This early trauma, I think, sowed the seeds for his lifelong obsession with identity, duality, and the search for meaning. Dick's childhood was turbulent. His parents divorced when he was young, and he moved with his mother to California. He was a bright but troubled child, plagued by anxiety and a sense of alienation. He found solace in books, particularly science fiction, and began writing at an early age. By the time he was a teenager, he was already wrestling with questions about the nature of reality, a theme that would dominate his later work. After high school, Dick briefly attended the University of California, Berkeley, but dropped out, feeling disillusioned by the rigid academic structure. Instead, he threw himself into writing, publishing his first short story in 1952. The 1950s were a prolific period for Dick, but they were also a time of personal turmoil. He struggled with mental health issues, including bouts of depression and anxiety, and his relationships were often chaotic. Over the course of his life, he would marry 5 times and have 3 children, but his personal life was anything but stable. Despite these challenges, Dick's career flourished. He published dozens of novels and short stories, many of which explored themes of identity, reality, and perception. Works like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and Ubik established him as a master of science fiction, but Dick was never content to stay within the boundaries of genre. His writing was deeply philosophical, drawing on influences as diverse as Plato, Carl Jung, and Zen Buddhism. He was fascinated by the idea that the world we perceive might not be the real world, and he used his fiction to explore these ideas in depth. But while his professional life seemed successful, Dick's personal life was unraveling. By the late 1960s, he was using amphetamines to fuel his writing, a habit that took a toll on his physical and mental health. He also became increasingly paranoid, convinced that he was being watched by government agencies or other shadowy entities. These fears were not entirely unfounded. Dick's anti-authoritarian views and his fascination with subversive ideas had indeed attracted the attention of the FBI. But his paranoia went beyond rational suspicion. It became a defining feature of his worldview, and it's a thread that runs through much of his work. Then came the event that changed everything, February and March of 1974. Dick had just undergone dental surgery, and he was recovering at home when a young woman delivered painkillers to his door. He noticed that she was wearing a necklace with a fish symbol, a sign used by early Christians. At that moment, Dick experienced what he later described as a pink beam of light that seemed to convey vast amounts of information directly into his mind. Over the following weeks, he experienced a series of visions and revelations. He believed he was living in 2 timelines simultaneously, one in 1974 California and another in 1st century Rome. He also became convinced that an otherworldly intelligence, which he called VALIS, the vast active living intelligence system, was communicating with him. These experiences profoundly affected Dick, as I'm sure they would anybody. He described them as both terrifying and exhilarating, a mix of divine revelation and existential crisis. He began to question everything he thought he knew about the world. Was reality an illusion? Was time an artificial construct? Was he a prophet, a madman, or something in between? These questions consumed him for the rest of his life and became the foundation for the exegesis. So, what exactly is the exegesis of Philip K. Dick? At its core, it's a document of Dick's attempts to make sense of his 1974 experiences. is not a polished work of philosophy or theology. It's a sprawling, chaotic collection of notes, letters, and reflections. But within this chaos, there's a profound sense of urgency, a desperate need to understand the nature of reality and his place within it. To understand the exegesis, we also need to understand Dick's relationship with religion and spirituality. He was raised in a nominally Christian household, but he was never a devout believer. Instead, his spiritual journey was eclectic, drawing on a wide range of traditions and philosophies. He was fascinated by Gnosticism, the ancient belief that the material world is an illusion created by a flawed or malevolent deity. This idea resonated deeply with Dick, who often described our reality as a black iron prison that obscures the true divine reality, and we're going to get onto that a bit later. At the same time, Dick was deeply influenced by modern science and technology. He was fascinated by quantum mechanics, cybernetics, and the emerging field of artificial intelligence. These influences are evident in his writing, which often blends metaphysical speculation with cutting-edge scientific concepts. In the Exegesis, we see Dick grappling with the tension between these two worlds, the mystical and the technological. Was the pink beam of light a divine revelation, or was it a glitch in his brain's neural circuitry? Was VALIS a spiritual entity, or was it some kind of advanced AI from the future? Dick's intellectual curiosity was matched only by his emotional vulnerability. He was a man who felt deeply and suffered greatly. He struggled with feelings of alienation and despair, and he often questioned his own sanity. But rather than shy away from these struggles, he embraced them as part of his quest for truth. In the Exegesis, we see a man who is willing to confront the darkest corners of his mind in search of enlightenment. In many ways, Philip K. Dick was ahead of his time. His work anticipated many of the challenges that we face today, from the rise of artificial intelligence to the blurring of reality in the digital age. But perhaps his greatest contribution is his willingness to ask the big questions, the questions that many of us shy away from because they're too overwhelming or unsettling. What is real? What does it mean to be human? Is there a higher power guiding our lives, or are we adrift in a meaningless universe? Dick didn't have definitive answers to these questions, and he didn't pretend to. Instead, he embraced the uncertainty, the contradictions, and the mystery. And that, I think, is what makes his work so compelling. In the Exegesis, we see a man who is unafraid to grapple with the unknown, even when it leads him to the edge of madness. Now that we've explored the life of Philip K. Dick and the extraordinary experiences that shaped his thinking, it's time to dive into the heart of the Exegesis. This is where Dick's relentless questioning of reality, divinity, and existence truly comes alive. The Exegesis is not a cohesive narrative. It is more of a sprawling labyrinth of ideas, speculations, and reflections. But within this chaos, there are recurring themes that give us an insight into Dick's obsessions and his search for meaning. Today we're going to explore some of the most compelling ones: the nature of reality, the influence of Gnosticism, the concept of time, and questions about identity and consciousness. Let's begin with perhaps the central question of the Exegesis. What is real? This theme runs like a thread through all of Philip K. Dick's work, from his novels to his private writings. In the Exegesis, Dick doesn't just question the reality of the external world. He questions the very foundations of perception, memory, and existence. One of Dick's key insights is that reality is not fixed. He believed that what we perceive as real is often a construct, a fragile framework shaped by our senses, beliefs, and societal norms. In his 1974 experiences, he felt as though the veil of ordinary perception had been lifted, revealing a deeper, more authentic reality. He described this as a moment of anamnesis, a kind of spiritual remembering of truths that had been hidden from him. In the Exegesis, Dick repeatedly returns to the idea that the world we inhabit is a counterfeit reality, what he called the black iron prison. This prison is a metaphor for the limitations imposed on us by materialism, ideology, and illusion. He was deeply influenced by simulation theory long before it became a trendy topic spouted by, Elon Musk and all over X and everything else. And he speculated that our reality might be a kind of simulation or projection. If this sounds familiar, it's because these ideas have since been popularized in films like The Matrix and in discussions about artificial intelligence. But for Dick, this wasn't just a philosophical exercise, it was a deeply personal and existential concern. Next, we turn to the spiritual dimension of the exegesis. One of the most fascinating aspects of the book is Dick's engagement with Gnosticism, an ancient belief system that views the material world as a flawed or false creation. In Gnostic thought, the physical universe is often attributed to a demiurge, a lesser deity who traps souls in a world of illusion, and I think you'll have come across that name if you've ever watched Stranger Things. Dick was captivated by this idea, and it became a cornerstone of his worldview. He saw the Black Iron Prison not just as a metaphor for materialism, but as a literal manifestation of a flawed creation. For Dick, the 1974 visions were a glimpse beyond the prison, a revelation of the divine reality that lies behind the illusion. He referred to the divine reality as the plasmate, a living, intelligent force that transcends time and space. In the exegesis, he describes it as a kind of spiritual DNA that connects all living beings to the divine source. This idea resonates a lot with Eastern philosophies, such as the concept of Brahman in Hinduism or the Tao in Taoism, where the ultimate reality is seen as a unified, all-encompassing force. But Dick's relationship with the divine was complicated. He was both awed and terrified by the idea of a higher power, as I think we all should be. He often questioned whether his visions were truly divine or whether they were deceptive. Was the plasmate a benevolent force, or was it just another layer of the illusion? This tension between faith and doubt, revelation and deception, is one of the most compelling aspects of the exegesis. Another recurring theme in the exegesis is the nature of time. Dick believed that time is not linear but layered, a concept that he explored in both his fiction and his philosophical writings. In his 1974 visions, he felt as though he was living in two timelines simultaneously, the modern world and ancient Rome. This idea of overlapping timelines led him to speculate that history is not what it seems. In the exegesis, he suggests that the present is an illusion and that the true reality lies in the past, or perhaps outside of time altogether. He often returned to the idea that the Roman Empire never truly ended, and that the oppressive forces of ancient Rome continue to operate in our world, disguised as modern institutions. Dick's views on time were influenced by both Eastern philosophy and modern physics. He was fascinated by the idea of eternal recurrence, the notion that time is cyclical and that events repeat infinitely. He also speculated about the possibility of time travel not as a physical journey, but as a shift in consciousness that allows one to perceive different layers of reality. This theme of time as a construct resonates with contemporary ideas about quantum mechanics and multiverse theory. But for Dick, this wasn't just a theoretical concept. He saw it as a spiritual insight. In the exegesis, he grapples with the idea that by breaking free from the illusion of time, we can access a higher state of awareness and connect with the divine. Finally, we come to the theme of identity and consciousness. For Philip K. Dick, the question of who am I was as central as what is real. In the exegesis, he explores the idea that our sense of self is just as fragile and constructed as our perception of reality. Dick often described himself as a plural entity, suggesting that his identity was not fixed, but fluid. He believed that his 1974 experiences had awakened him to a higher state of consciousness, one that allowed him to perceive multiple versions of himself across different timelines. This idea is both thrilling and unsettling. If our identity is not fixed, then what anchors us? What makes us who we are? This theme of fragmented identity is a hallmark of Dick's work. In novels like A Scanner Darkly and Ubik, he explores the breakdown of individual identity and the merging of consciousness with external forces. And we'll get into some of those ideas a bit later. In the exegesis, he takes these ideas even further, speculating that our individual selves are mere fragments of a larger collective consciousness. This idea is closely tied to his concept of the plasmate. If the plasmate is a divine force that connects all living beings, then our individual identities are just nodes in a vast interconnected network. Now, of course, this perspective challenges the Western emphasis on individualism and offers us a more holistic view of existence. You might be wondering at this stage, well, what do these themes have to do with us here in 2025? The answer to this is everything. In a world increasingly shaped by technology, artificial intelligence, and virtual reality, the questions Dick explored in the exegesis are more relevant than ever. Take the nature of reality, for example. As we navigate a world of deepfakes, virtual environments, and algorithmically curated experiences, it's very easy to feel disconnected from what's real. Dick's insights remind us to question our perceptions and to look beyond the surface. Or consider the theme of identity. In an age of social media and digital avatars, our sense of self is more fluid than ever. Dick's exploration of fragmented identity can help us navigate this new landscape with curiosity and self-awareness. And finally, there's the question of time. In a world that often feels fractured and chaotic, Dick's vision of layered timelines offers a way to think about history and progress that goes beyond the linear narrative. It invites us to consider the deeper patterns and connections that shape our lives. In this section, we're going to explore how the often bewildering ideas from the Exegesis weave their way into Philip K. Dick's fiction. While the Exegesis is a sprawling, fragmented collection of philosophical reflections and metaphysical speculation, his novels and short stories translate those abstract ideas into vivid narratives that challenge our perceptions of reality, identity, and time. I did that whole paragraph in one take. What's fascinating about Dick's fiction is how seamlessly he embeds his philosophical concerns into the fabric of his storytelling. His characters, worlds, and plots are often vehicles for exploring the very questions he grappled with in the Exegesis. Let's dive into some of his major works and examine how the themes of the Exegesis come to life in his fiction. We're going to start with Ubik, which is one of Dick's most celebrated novels and a perfect example of his exploration of reality as a fragile, shifting construct. In Ubik, the characters inhabit a world where the boundaries between life and death, reality and illusion, are constantly in flux. The story begins in a future where technology allows for a kind of suspended animation after death, keeping people in a state of half-life where they can still communicate with the living. However, as the narrative progresses, the characters begin to experience strange regressions in time, and the nature of their reality becomes increasingly unstable. This instability is at the heart of the Exegesis. Dick's writings often return to the idea that what we perceive as real is not fixed but contingent, a construct shaped by perception, memory, and external forces. In Ubik, this concept is dramatized through the mysterious substance, Ubik itself, which appears to be a stabilizing force in an otherwise crumbling reality. The novel ends ambiguously, leaving the reader to question what was real all along. I'm trying not to give you too many spoilers in case you've not read these yet. The parallels to the Exegesis are striking. In his philosophical writings, Dick speculated about the idea of a counterfeit reality, a world built to deceive us, what he called the Black Iron Prison. In Ubik, this counterfeit reality becomes a literal prison for the characters, one that only the mysterious Ubik can counteract. The novel captures Dick's belief that there is a hidden truth behind the illusory world that we inhabit, but accessing it requires both insight and faith. Another of Dick's novels, VALIS, serves as, and you'll have recognized that name from earlier, serves as perhaps the most direct link between the Exegesis and his fiction. In fact, VALIS can almost be read as a fictionalized account of Dick's 1974 mystical experiences and his subsequent reflections in the Exegesis. The novel's protagonist, Horse Lover Fat, yes, that's Horse Lover Fat, is a thinly veiled version of Dick himself. Fat experiences a series, and if I remember correctly, I think Philip in Greek means fond of horses, and Dick is German for fat. So he uses that to overlay his name into Horse Lover Fat as the character. So in the story, in VALIS, Fat experiences a series of divine revelations after a beam of pink light transmits vast amounts of knowledge into his mind, which is a clear reference to Dick's own experiences with the pink beam and the vast active living intelligence system. The novel follows Fat's attempt to make sense of these experiences, blending Gnostic theology, Christian mysticism, and speculative metaphysics. One of the central themes of VALIS is the concept of the divine as a living intelligent force, what Dick describes in the Exegesis as the plasmate. In the novel, VALIS represents this force. It's a mysterious entity that operates both within and beyond the material world. Fat and his friends embark on, I'm trying not to laugh when I say that, because Fat and his friends embark on a quest, like the goblins, like the hobbits, not the goblins, like the hobbits, to uncover the nature of VALIS, grappling with questions about free will, divine intervention, and the nature of evil. VALIS is essentially a dramatization of the Exegesis, so maybe it's probably worth reading VALIS first before even attempting to go through the Exegesis in any level. The character's search for meaning mirrors Dick's own spiritual journey, and the novel's blend of philosophical speculation and personal narrative captures the fragmented exploratory nature of the exegesis. It's a work that blurs the line between fiction and autobiography, inviting us as readers to join Dick in his quest for ultimate truth. Next, let's turn to The Man in the High Castle. Now, this is Dick's alternate history masterpiece, and I do not use the word masterpiece lightly. While the novel is often celebrated for its very richly imagined world, one in which the Axis powers won World War II, it also delves very deeply into the nature of time and parallel realities. In the novel, characters encounter a mysterious book called The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, which depicts an alternate reality where the Allies won the war. This concept of a book within a book, containing a reality different from the one the characters inhabit, reflects Dick's fascination with overlapping timelines and the idea that multiple versions of reality might coexist. In the Exegesis, Dick often speculated that time is not linear but layered, and that the present we experience is just one possible reality among many. He believed that his 1974 visions allowed him to glimpse an alternate timeline, one in which the Roman Empire still existed, overlaid on the modern world. In The Man in the High Castle, this idea becomes a narrative device, challenging both the characters and the reader to question the nature of their reality. The novel's exploration of parallel realities aligns with Dick's belief that truth is multifaceted and often hidden. By presenting an alternate history alongside the character's present reality, Dick invites us to consider how history is constructed and how our perceptions of time and truth are shaped by the narratives that we accept. There's also, if you haven't read The Man in the High Castle, there is also a TV show. I don't know if it's still on Amazon, but it was a while ago. So you can actually go and watch it yourself. If you don't fancy reading the book, you just want to watch it instead. That's cool. No judgment whatsoever. And I mean that. It's a very good TV show, actually, and I would recommend it. So you can go and find that possibly on Amazon somewhere if you fancy giving that a look as well. Another novel that directly reflects Dick's philosophical concerns is A Scanner Darkly. Set in a dystopian near future, the story follows Bob Arctor, an undercover agent investigating a drug ring. As Arctor becomes addicted to the drug substance D, his sense of self begins to fracture. He loses track of who he is, unable to distinguish between his real identity and the persona he has adopted as part of his investigation. This theme of the fragmented self is central to the exegesis. Dick often described himself as a plural entity, suggesting that his identity was fluid and multifaceted. In A Scanner Darkly, this idea becomes a chilling exploration of the psychological and existential consequences of a fractured identity. The novel's depiction of Arctor's disintegration mirrors Dick's own struggles with mental health and his belief that the self is not fixed but constructed. It also reflects the influence of the exegesis, where Dick grapples with the idea that our individual identities are just fragments of a larger collective consciousness. And again, I'm just going to signpost you to, there's a film called A Scanner Darkly, which is obviously a dramatization of the novel, starring Keanu Reeves and Robert Downey Jr. And Woody Harrelson, I think, is in it as well. It's very, very good. Directed by Richard Linklater, who is one of my favourite directors. And it's all done in a really interesting way. And if you haven't seen that, I would highly recommend you go and watch A Scanner Darkly. Absolutely phenomenal film. If you're into stuff like this, obviously. You could think it's a pile of shit, but I really, really enjoyed it. Now, finally, we're going to look at possibly one of the most famous of his stories, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is the novel that inspired the film Blade Runner. At its core, this novel is an exploration of what it means to be human in a world increasingly dominated by technology and artificial intelligence. The story follows Rick Deckard, a bounty hunter tasked with retiring rogue androids. As he interacts with these androids, Deckard begins to question the nature of empathy, morality, and the human soul. Are the androids truly other, or are they just another iteration of humanity? In the exegesis, Dick speculates that our reality might be a simulation or projection, and that the boundaries between human and artificial intelligence are more porous than we think. This theme is central to Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, where the line between human and machine is constantly blurred. The novel's exploration of artificial reality and simulation reflects Dick's belief that what we perceive as real is often constructed. It also challenges us to reconsider what it means to be human, a question that resonates deeply in today's world of AI and digital technology. As we've seen, Philip K. Dick's fiction is deeply intertwined with the ideas of the exegesis. His novels are much more than stories. They're like thought experiments, philosophical inquiries, and spiritual explorations, all kind of rolled into one. Through his characters and worlds, Dick grapples with the same questions that consumed him in the Exegesis. What is real? Who are we? And what lies beyond the veil of perception? What makes Dick's work so powerful is its ability to bridge the gap between abstract philosophy and lived experience. His fiction invites us to engage with these big questions, not as distant intellectual exercises, but as deeply personal and urgent concerns. So far, we've looked at the themes of the Exegesis, and we've looked at how those themes are woven into the stories that Philip K. Dick put out in his lifetime. So now I want to look at some of the philosophical insights from the Exegesis and dive into some of these ideas a little more deeply than we have already. So at the very heart of the Exegesis lies a very profound metaphysical inquiry. What is the fundamental nature of reality? Now, obviously, that is a huge question, and subsequently the book itself is also huge. But we've got to bear in mind that for Philip K. Dick, he wasn't coming at this from just an angle of philosophical curiosity. This was a really personal and deeply urgent quest for him to try and understand what reality was. And it all was born from the 1974 experience, the pink beam and his interaction with VALIS. It created in him the sense that the world that he inhabited was false, and he struggled intensely to try and understand why that was the case. Now, one of the biggest metaphors in the Exegesis, we've mentioned it a few times, I'm just going to go into it in a bit more depth now, it's the black iron prison. Now, this is a term that he uses to describe the oppressive, illusory nature of the material world. Drawing on Gnostic philosophy, he suggests that the world we perceive is a flawed creation, like a counterfeit reality designed to keep us trapped. For Dick, this wasn't just a poetic metaphor. It became, as we've mentioned, it was a lived experience. He felt the prison's weight in the structures of society, the limitations of language, and even in his own mind. Now, this idea resonates a lot with modern discussions of systemic oppression, echo chambers, and the ways that technology can shape and sometimes distort our perception of the world. Dick's insight here is a really powerful reminder that in order to see reality clearly, we must first recognize the forces that obscure it. Now, in complete contrast to the black iron prison, Dick speaks of a divine reality, a hidden truth that lies behind the veil of illusion. He refers to this ultimate reality as the plasmate, which he saw as a living, intelligent force that connects all beings. The plasmate is both transcendent and immanent, existing beyond time and space, yet accessible through moments of insight or revelation. Now, philosophically, this idea aligns with traditions like Hinduism's Brahman and the Tao in Taoism, or Spinoza's concept of God as nature. What sets Dick apart here is his deeply personal approach. He didn't arrive at these ideas through formal study, but through his own mystical experiences. Now, in this way, the Exegesis becomes kind of a modern scripture, a record of one man's attempts to articulate the ineffable. But what can we take from this? Dick's metaphysical reflections challenge us to look beyond appearances, to question the structures that we take for granted, and to remain open to the possibility of deeper truths. Whether we call it the plasmate, the divine, or simply the unknown, his writings encourage us to engage with the mysteries of existence with humility and curiosity. Very closely tied to Dick's metaphysical musings are his epistemological questions. In the Exegesis, Dick repeatedly grapples with the limits of perception, the reliability of memory, and the role of language in shaping our understanding. He was acutely aware of the fragility of human perception. He believed that our senses provide only a partial or often distorted view of reality. This insight is echoed in modern neuroscience, which tells us that our brains don't passively record the world, but actively construct it based on very limited input. For Dick, this meant that the reality we experience is always mediated, a construct shaped by biology, culture, and personal history. In the Exegesis, he speculates that our perceptions might be manipulated by external forces, whether they be societal structures, technological systems, or even divine entities. This idea resonates with contemporary concerns about media manipulation, algorithmic bias, and the ways in which our digital environments shape our view of the world. Memory plays a central role in Dick's epistemology. In his 1974 experiences, he felt as though he was remembering a deeper truth, a process he called anamnesis. This idea has roots in Platonic philosophy, where learning is seen as a form of remembering eternal truths. For Dick, anamnesis was both exhilarating and unsettling, raising questions about the reliability of memory and the nature of the self. Today, this insight feels particularly relevant. In an age of misinformation and historical revisionism, the question of how we construct and preserve collective memory is more pressing than ever. Dick was also deeply skeptical of language. He believed that words, while necessary for communication, often distort or limit our understanding of reality. In the Exegesis, he compares language to a map that fails to capture the richness and complexity of the terrain that it represents. This skepticism aligns with postmodern critiques of language and truth. Like Derrida or Foucault, Dick saw language as a tool that can both reveal and obscure, liberate and constrain. His work reminds us to approach language critically, recognizing both its power and its limitations. As abstract as Dick's insights can be, they also offer us some practical lessons for navigating life. While the Exegesis doesn't provide a step-by-step guide, it does offer a philosophy of living, a way to approach the mysteries of existence with resilience, curiosity, and compassion. One of Dick's most powerful insights is his willingness to embrace uncertainty. He didn't claim to have definitive answers to the questions he posed. Instead, he saw the search for truth as an ongoing process, one that requires both intellectual rigor and emotional vulnerability. In a world that often demands certainty, whether in politics, science, or personal identity, Dick's example is a reminder that it's okay to live with questions. In fact, it's often in the questioning that we find meaning. While Dick's visions were extraordinary, his philosophy was grounded in the belief that the divine is accessible to everyone, not just through mystical experiences, but in the ordinary moments of life. Whether it's a conversation with a friend, a walk in nature, or a moment of quiet reflection, Dick believed that these small acts could connect us to something greater. This perspective aligns with mindfulness practices and spiritual traditions that emphasize presence and gratitude. It's a reminder that the search for meaning doesn't have to be grand or dramatic. It can start with simply paying attention. Finally, Dick's work encourages us to challenge the illusions that shape our lives, whether it's the illusion of materialism, the illusion of certainty, or the illusion of separation. The Exegesis invites us to question what we take for granted and to seek deeper truths. In practical terms, this might mean questioning societal norms, examining our own beliefs, or simply being more mindful of the ways we interact with the world. It's about cultivating a sense of awareness and agency, even in the face of uncertainty. Philip K. Dick once said, "Reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away." In the Exegesis, he pushed this idea to its limits, exploring the boundaries of reality, perception, and belief. His insights challenge us to see the world and ourselves with new eyes, to question what we think we know, and to remain open to the mysteries of existence. In this, our final segment, we're going to dive into some of the most fascinating and thought-provoking excerpts from the Exegesis of Philip K. Dick. Now, these passages not only highlight the themes that we've discussed, reality, divinity, time, and identity, but also offer us a glimpse into Dick's unique way of thinking and his relentless pursuit of truth. As we go through these excerpts, I'll provide some context, unpack their meaning, and explore their implications for both Dick's philosophy and our own lives. But first, I'm going to read the very first paragraph from the introduction of the Exegesis. And I'm not going to give you a context or my meaning on this one, but I will for the others. I just want to give you a feel for what it's like. The beautiful and imperishable comes into existence due to the suffering of individual perishable creatures who themselves are not beautiful, and must be reshaped to form a template from which the beautiful is printed, forged, extracted, converted. This is the terrible law of the universe. This is the basic law. It is a fact. Also, it is a fact that the suffering of the individual animal is so great that it arouses an ultimate and absolute abhorrence and pity in us when we are confronted by it. This is the essence of tragedy, the collision of two absolutes. Absolute suffering is the means to, absolute beauty. Neither absolute should be subordinated to the other, but this is not how it is. The suffering is subordinated to the value of the art produced. Thus the essence of horror underlies our realization of the bedrock nature of the universe. Now that was a passage that he wrote in 1980, which was basically an inquiry into matters of being and the purposes of consciousness, suffering, and existence. It's the sort of thing that I would expect to see not from a science fiction writer, but from a philosopher, which I think underlines Philip K. Dick as a very prevalent philosopher of the 20th century, even though he's better known for his writing. I'm sure we've all seen Blade Runner. We've all come across Minority Report and Total Recall. That's another one of his. Now let's get into it with a passage describing the Black Iron Prison. The Black Iron Prison is a vast illusion that makes us believe we are free, but in reality, we are trapped in a system designed to keep us blind to the truth. It is constructed from false perceptions, societal control, and our own complicity. Now this excerpt captures one of the most central metaphors in Dick's work. The Black Iron Prison isn't just a commentary on societal oppression, it's a critique of the ways that we limit ourselves, through unquestioned beliefs, reliance on sensory perception, and the stories that we tell ourselves about the world. On one level, this passage critiques authoritarianism and societal structures, but on another, it's deeply personal. The prison is also internal, built from our fears, habits, and attachments. For Dick, breaking free from this prison required a radical shift in perception, a willingness to see beyond the veil of illusion. Today, this idea feels especially relevant. As we've said, we're in an age of algorithmic controlled and curated realities. It's very easy to feel like we're living in our own version of the Black Iron Prison. Dick challenges us to question these structures and to seek a freer, more authentic way of being. What are the walls of your own Black Iron Prison, and how might you begin to see beyond them? You haven't got to answer that now. You haven't even got to put it in the comments. You can take that away and think about it. There'll be more questions to come. Next, let's look at a passage where Dick describes the plasmate, his concept of a divine living force. The plasmate is not a thing, but a living information entity. It flows through us, connecting us to each other and to the divine source. It is the bridge between the material and the spiritual, the key to anamnesis, the remembering of what has been forgotten. Now, this passage offers us a vision of interconnectedness. For Dick, the plasmate isn't a deity in the traditional sense, but a dynamic force that links all living beings. It's both immanent, present within us, and transcendent, pointing to a higher reality. The idea of the plasmate echoes spiritual traditions, as we said, like Hinduism's Brahman or the Tao in Taoism, but it's also uniquely Dickian. He viewed the plasmate as a kind of cosmic intelligence, a living information that could be accessed through moments of insight or mystical experience. One of the most striking aspects of this passage is the emphasis on anamnesis, the idea that enlightenment comes not from learning something new, but from remembering a deeper truth. This aligns with Plato's philosophy and suggests that the divine is already within us, waiting to be discovered. Have you ever experienced a moment that felt like remembering something profound? What might the plasmate represent in your own life? There's more questions for you to think about. Now, let's explore an excerpt where Dick reflects on time. Time is not a linear progression from past to future. It is a construct, a veil that obscures the eternal present. What we think of as history is happening all at once, layered and simultaneous. The true reality exists outside of time in a state of pure being. Here, Dick challenges one of our most fundamental assumptions, that time flows in a straight line. For him, time is an illusion, a construct that limits our understanding of reality. This idea of the eternal present resonates with Eastern philosophies such as Zen Buddhism's emphasis on mindfulness and the now. It also aligns with modern physics, particularly the block universe theory, which suggests that past, present, and future all coexist. For Dick, the implications of this idea were both liberating and unsettling. If time is an illusion, then so are our notions of progress, causality, and even personal identity. Yet by transcending this illusion, we can connect with a higher state of awareness, a perspective that sees beyond the layers of history and into the timeless truth. How does this idea of time as an illusion change the way that you think about your life and your place in history? In this next excerpt, Dick explores the fluidity of identity. We are not singular beings, but fragments of a greater whole. The self we experience is a construct, a temporary mask worn by the eternal consciousness. To awaken is to see through this mask and recognize the unity beneath. This passage is a direct challenge to the Western emphasis on individualism. For Dick, the self isn't fixed or autonomous. It's a fragment of something larger, a node in a vast network of consciousness. Now, this idea aligns with Eastern concepts like the Hindu notion of Atman, the individual soul as part of Brahman. It also resonates with modern neuroscience, which suggests that our sense of self is a dynamic construct shaped by brain processes and social interactions. Dick's vision of the self as a mask worn by eternal consciousness invites us to question the stories we tell about who we are. It's a humbling and in some ways freeing perspective. If the self is a construct, then it can also be reimagined, reshaped, or even transcended. How might your life change if you saw your identity as fluid rather than fixed? What greater whole might you be a part of? Now finally, let's look at a passage where Dick confronts the nature of truth. Truth is not a static thing to be found, but a dynamic process to be lived. The veil of illusion is thick, and it requires courage, curiosity, and love to see through it. Yet even when glimpsed, the truth is always partial, always unfolding. This excerpt encapsulates one of Dick's core beliefs, that truth is not something we arrive at, but something we engage with. It's a process, a journey, rather than a destination. This idea is both empowering and humbling. It suggests that we should approach truth-seeking with a sense of wonder and openness, recognizing that our understanding will always be incomplete. It also highlights the importance of courage and love in this process. For Dick, truth wasn't just an intellectual pursuit, it was deeply emotional and relational. In a world where certainty is often prized, Dick's perspective invites us to embrace uncertainty and to see the search for truth as a collaborative, ongoing effort. What truths are you currently seeking, and how might you approach them with more courage, curiosity, and love? As we've seen, the excerpts from the Exegesis offer some profound and terrifying insights into reality, divinity, time, identity, and truth. They challenge us to see both the world and ourselves with new eyes, to question what we take for granted, and to remain open to the mysteries of existence. Philip K. Dick didn't claim to have all the answers, and perhaps that's what makes his work so powerful. In his willingness to wrestle with uncertainty, he reminds us that the search for meaning is as important as the answers that we find. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I have to say on the Exegesis of Philip K. Dick. As we reach the conclusion of today's episode, I find myself reflecting on this rather incredible journey that we've taken through the mind of Philip K. Dick and his Exegesis. This has been no ordinary exploration. It's been a dive into one of the most complex and fascinating works of philosophy, theology, and metaphysical speculation. Dick's writings challenge us to reconsider not just what we know, but how we know it, and what it means to live a meaningful life in a world that often feels fragmented and uncertain. Let's take a moment to recap the key insights from our journey today. We began with an exploration of Philip K. Dick's life, a life marked by creativity, trauma, and an unrelenting search for truth. From his early struggles with identity and loss to his profound 1974 mystical experiences, Dick's personal journey laid the foundation for the Exegesis. His life was not just a backdrop, but an integral part of the ideas that he explored. From there, we delved into the themes of the Exegesis. We talked about the Black Iron Prison, Dick's metaphor for the oppressive illusions that bind us. We explored his vision of the plasmate, that living divine force that connects all beings. We wrestled with his radical ideas about time as a construct and the self as a fragmented fluid entity. And we considered his belief that truth is not a static endpoint, but a dynamic, ongoing process. Then, we analysed some excerpts from the Exegesis, moments where Dick's thoughts crystallised into powerful or insane insights. These passages reminded us to question our assumptions, to seek the divine in the everyday, and to embrace uncertainty as a natural part of the human experience. And now here we are, standing at the edge of these ideas, wondering how to make sense of it all. One of the remarkable things about the Exegesis is that it resists easy conclusions. It's not a book that hands you neatly packaged answers. Instead, it invites you to wrestle with questions, big, messy, existential questions that don't have simple solutions. And maybe that's the point. Philip K. Dick's genius wasn't just in his ability to ask these questions, but in his willingness to live in the tension between knowing and not knowing. He didn't shy away from the contradictions in his ideas. Instead, he embraced them, seeing them as part of the mystery he was trying to understand. And that's what makes the Exegesis such a powerful work. Not its coherence, but its courage. It's a testament to the human spirit's capacity to seek meaning even in the face of chaos and uncertainty. It's a reminder that the journey is just as important as the destination. So why does the Exegesis matter in 2025? What relevance does it have for us in this fast-paced, hyper-connected and often disorienting world? First, it challenges us to think critically about reality. In an age where technology can blur the lines between real and artificial, Dick's insights feel more urgent than ever. His metaphor of the black iron prison reminds us to question the structures that shape our perceptions, whether they're social, political, or technological. Second, the Exegesis offers a deeply personal model of truth-seeking. Dick didn't rely on established authorities or dogmas. He trusted his own experiences, even when they led him into uncharted territory. This kind of intellectual and spiritual independence is a valuable lesson in a world that often rewards conformity over curiosity. And finally, the Exegesis speaks to our universal longing for connection and meaning. In a fragmented world, Dick's vision of the plasmate, a living force that unites all beings, offers a hopeful counterpoint to the isolation many of us feel. It reminds us that even in our most solitary moments, we are part of something larger. As we close this episode, I want to leave you with a few reflections, lessons that we can take from the Exegesis and apply to our own lives. Don't be afraid to ask big questions. Whether it's about reality, identity, or the nature of the divine, these questions are what make us human. You don't have to have all the answers. In fact, the search itself can be profoundly meaningful. Cultivate curiosity and skepticism in equal measure. Philip K. Dick's life was a testament to the power of questioning, not just the world around us, but also our own assumptions and beliefs. In a time of information overload, this balance is more important than ever. Embrace uncertainty. It's easy to crave certainty in a world that often feels chaotic. But as Dick's work reminds us, uncertainty is not something to fear. It's an opportunity for growth, discovery, and connection. And finally, look for the divine in the everyday. Whether or not you believe in the plasmate or a higher power, there's something profoundly inspiring about Dick's vision of interconnectedness. It's a reminder that meaning isn't always found in grand revelations. Sometimes it's in the small, ordinary moments of life. If you found today's exploration of the Exegesis intriguing, I encourage you to dive deeper. Read the book if you haven't already. It is not an easy read. It is a fragmented, dense, and often bewildering read, but it is also incredibly rewarding. Even if you don't agree with Dick's conclusions, you'll find your own thinking challenged and expanded. I also invite you to reflect on the questions that we've discussed today. What is real? Who are you? Who are you? What truths are you seeking? And how might Philip K. Dick's insights help you navigate these questions in your own life? Now, before I wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought. Philip K. Dick once said, "The basic tool for the manipulation of reality is the manipulation of words. If you can control the meaning of words, you can control the people who must use the words." Now, this quote captures the essence of his work. His awareness that reality is not just something we experience, but something we construct. And if we can construct it, then we can also question it, challenge it, and perhaps even change it. I want to thank you all for spending your time with me today. I hope that you got something out of this and it's opened your eyes a little bit to the works of Philip K. Dick and the nature of reality and time, and perhaps made you wonder whether you are also living in ancient Rome at the same time as 2025. And if you've enjoyed this episode, of course, please consider subscribing to the podcast, leaving us a review, or sharing it with others who might find it interesting. Your support helps us to continue to bring you this sort of content. As always, if anything in this episode has resonated with you in any way, then I would love to hear from you. You can share your stories on our website at theobservingeye.com, which is where you'll also find all of our articles and podcast episodes, or on social media. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/@theobservingeye, and on TikTok, Instagram, and X with the handle @theobservingeye as well. You can also email me at david@theobservingeye.com, and I do respond to those emails myself. So if you have any questions or you're interested in anything we've talked about, drop me a message and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll catch you soon.
You've been listening to The Observing Eye. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I hope it's been useful. And if you're interested in any more of my writing or work around psychology, philosophy, and general day-to-day living, please go and take a look at my Substack, which is theobservingeye.com. And that's I as in the letter, not I as in the gelatinous organ through which you see. Take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll catch you soon.